right, good morning everyone, and thanks for joining our webinar. A couple of items before we get started. We'll cover a lot of ground today, so we'll make the slides available to you after the webcast so that you can refer back to them. To ask questions, use the Q&A widget at the top right of your screen. We'll answer them throughout and try to cover a few more at the end of the session if we don't get to them through the session. And finally, this session is being recorded and will be made available on our website for later playback. So with that, I would like to introduce today's presenter. Chuck Kiesling is the solutions architect responsible for designing and consulting on data center solutions for data networks. So Chuck, welcome and take it away.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you for everyone who took the time out of their day today to attend. So what's today all about? I'm going to start with a basic comparison, a 30,000-foot view of the two major platforms that we're going to be discussing. After that comparison, we're going to kind of jump in. We're going to review what we feel are really the 7 key most sought-after decision-making points when it comes to looking at a cloud solutions provider. And then finally, we'll just kind of do a review, and then we'll go over a bonus talking point for everybody. So before we get started, we're going to be a little bit nosy. I want to get an idea of really what's driving your move to the cloud, or what's got you considering that. So your poll should be on the screen by now, so I'll give everybody a minute to fill that out.
Make sure you hit the send button after you've completed the poll.
So while you all are finishing up on that poll, why are people moving? And the reality is that there's a lot of reasons why people move to the cloud. And as a matter of fact, what we're hearing is what really started the move to the cloud is people wanted that ability to save and then later access their files from home or vacation or wherever they may have been. And that they started using their Dropbox, their OneDrive, Google Drives to kind of save those things. And that quickly drove what we found to be the #1 reason for the cloud adoption, which is your remote work capability. And once people started doing that, it kind of led to what is actually the most addressed question I get when I'm talking to clients about cloud services, and that's security. And my answer tends to surprise most people, because the reality is cloud services are actually inherently, in most cases, more secure than a standard on-premise network. And if you take a look at that from an end-user standpoint, over 800,000 laptops are lost or stolen in an airport every year. And if you're utilizing a cloud-based solution and you're not allowing critical data to be synchronized offline, at that point you're just kind of dealing with a lost device. As opposed to lost data, which could potentially have larger repercussions. And if your concern lies with where that data is actually being stored, if you really think about it, when you're securing your on-premise network, you're responsible for your users and your data. Therefore, those repercussions belong to you. But as a cloud provider, they need to secure every connection and consider every possible scenario when it comes to a breach, because the repercussions behind that could be significantly larger. And then really, when you're considering a SaaS-based model, a lot of these major software vendors are starting to go to that auto-update platform. So when you take a look at your Adobe's and then the Microsoft Office suite, they have that ability to just stream those updates and just notify you when it's ready. So people are starting to consider that for that ease of update option. So now that we've talked about the why, let's take a look at the who. I mean, what players are in there? And we'll rewind a little bit back to 2013 when you take a look at the cloud market share. As you can see, it was pretty fragmented. There was a lot of players in that game, and at that point, it was pretty much anyone's game. It just mattered who saw that and who wanted to kind of jump forward. So now when we fast forward, we're going to go late 2015, you'll see that those positions have changed drastically. Both Office 365 and Google have increased significantly and taken a lot of that share from some of the other players in the market, which has kind of brought them forward to be the leaders in this space. And that's really, those two are what bring us here today, because we want to make sure that we give you guys the information that you need to make those decisions. So let's kind of level set right now. From a 30,000-foot view, you can tell that those features that each platform gives you are relatively similar. You know, they both have email, they both have a productivity suite, they both give you some sort of communications, a social aspect if that's what you really need. But you know, the reality is, does it actually satisfy the need, or does it just check that box? And again, that's what we're here to help you work through today with our 7 key points. So let's kind of get into this here, and we're going to start with our first point, which is really the familiarity. And when I say that, I don't mean what you're familiar with. There are other components that you really should take into consideration when you're looking at this point, and that's, you know, what are your partners using? What will your customers likely have? Do you have expansion plans? And one of the items that I always try to point out when we're having these conversations is, what's the demographic of the staff that you're working with? Just to kind of cite an example as to what I mean, if you're a larger enterprise-grade company with a slightly more seasoned staff, they might be significantly more familiar with the Microsoft Office suite. But if you're a smaller startup, you're going to be primarily cloud-based. Maybe you have a not as seasoned staff that you're going to be bringing on board. They grew up, they worked with that Google platform, so they may be more familiar with that. So it's definitely something that you're going to want to take into account. And once you've determined that portion of it, you want to see how that's going to fit into your staff and your budget as well. But as you can see from here, there's a wide range of these plans, ranging from the $2 in the Office 365 kiosk all the way up to the Office 365 brand new E5 plan. And it just comes down to what actually fits into into your structure. So if you're looking for something that's a little more, all of my staff, I just want everybody to have the same features, the same set, then a Google Apps is probably going to be more what you're looking for. But if you have some interns and maybe you have some executives that require this and a couple of people that are going to need a hosted VoIP solution, then you may want to start looking at Office 365 for that.
And what you're trying to show here, Chuck, is the cost of the various plans. And really, at the end of the day, the cost is always a factor, but maybe not as big a factor as making sure you get the right plan for your needs. Right? Nothing's more expensive than getting the wrong plan, even if it's cheaper from the outset.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And while cost does come into play, what we have actually found out during conversations with our clients is cost actually takes a back seat to making sure that the features that they're getting with what the money that they're spending takes priority. And when I say features, this is what I'm talking about. So each plan comes with something different, and it's all about how you're going to assign that out. And just to kind of draw a couple of points to attention, I want to show you the email space per user. So when you're looking at the kiosk plan, you can start all the way back at that 2 gig per user, but then you can go all the way up to the Google Apps Unlimited that gives you that unlimited space in that mailbox that you really could use. And you're going to be able to determine what you need by taking a look at what you currently have on-prem, and that'll help you make that decision. I also wanted to draw attention to the Google Apps plan, not the unlimited, where the data that you're actually getting, while it does say 30 gig, is shared amongst not just your email, but also your archive, your storage, and anything else that you're putting in your platform. And there is one key item that I wanted to draw attention to here, which is the new Microsoft Office 365 E5 plan. That is the only plan across the board that currently gives you a full hosted PBX solution to give you the ability to put your whole voice in the cloud. So once you've kind of determined what you're familiar with and how it fits into your budget, you need to start looking at compatibility. And what I mean by that is, what are you using as your day-to-day device? Are you using a tablet? Are you using a PC? Is it an iPad? Is it an Android tablet? And when you take a look at that, that's where you need to start taking into account which one of these plans will work with that device. And just to cite a couple of items, the browser compatibility. With Office 365, all browsers are supported, even the less popular browsers. So if you're using a PC and you have one of those less popular browsers, you know that 365 will work with it. Google does a great job centralizing on Chrome, IE, Firefox, and Safari, which are, of course, the most popular browsers that are on the market right now. So if you're using one of those four, then that point is kind of moot to you. If you're going to require a full desktop version of those applications, Office 365 has that ability. You can use that SaaS-based model and install locally. You can work offline and edit, alter, then come back online later and send over, where Google, it does require that online connection and access to their tenant to do that. Last point is just your mobile app availability. The reality is Android and iPhone are the two most popular mobile platforms out there, but there are some people that do have the BlackBerry and the Windows Phone. So you need to make sure that if you need that mobile productivity app, so either the Office or the Google apps, it does work for the mobile platform, not just for you, but for everybody that's in your environment. So the next point that is everyone's favorite topic, and that's compliance and security. And what you can tell from here is that Microsoft and Google have both spent a great deal of time making sure that they are working with different agencies to obtain security certifications, running through audits, just to make sure that they can serve everybody that they can in the most secure fashion that they can. And as a matter of fact, the most recent certification that was obtained is the SEC 17A-4 by Microsoft. And if you know what that means, then it definitely applies. If you don't, then to you, that's just letters and numbers. So, but the point is, they are spending a lot of time making sure that these certifications are up to date. But there is a piece that I want to draw attention to where Microsoft excels a little bit more, is that is in the end-user security platform. And what I mean by that is just a couple of components that they add in that give that little bit of added security. So rights management, for example, what that does is it gives you the ability to control forwarding, reply to all, whether somebody can actually save that or download it. So it gives you the ability to control what's done with those messages. The message encryption services, that one is relatively self-explanatory in definition, but with Office 365, when you sign up for Office 365, your server, your back-end online or Exchange Online is automatically encrypted, and any message that you send out is over an SSL port. So they're both a higher level of encryption, where Google actually just published something in the media saying that messages that you send out over Google are actually no longer encrypted. And then there's the data loss prevention. That one's relatively self-explanatory. What Office 365 does is it gives you that ability to decide what it is that you're going to allow in regards to your end users being able to do with those messages. So you don't want people deleting messages permanently. You want to be able to store them for a legal hold. You want to stick them in archive. So you can control that policy to make sure that you're not losing critical data that you're required to hold on to. So before we move further into allow me to take a quick drink, I just want to throw up one more poll to get just a little bit more information from you guys. How many people do you actually have that are dedicated to managing your current IT environment? So I'll give you a minute to fill that out. I actually have two questions in here. One of them is in regards to the email space for the Office 365 business plan. The one thing I did have incorrect on there is they did actually just recently upgrade the business plans for the mailbox to 50 gig, so it is no longer 25 gig. And the in-place archive for the Office 365 business premium is 50, and the E3 plan is now also unlimited. They state that it is 50 right out of the gate, and in order to get that upgrade, they do require that you call and request that increase. So I just wanted to make sure that I addressed those two questions before we jumped forward. So the reason that I was curious as to who or how many people you have dedicated to managing your environment was mainly because the setup process and management process to each one of these, while from the beginning looks like it's a little bit similar, there are different components that could take a little bit more time. So I just want to point out a couple of different components here, and management being one of them. So with Google, they're still expanding their partner ecosystem. So when it comes to that, you can have the administrative access to a Google tenant to help manage that for your client. But it operates a little bit differently than with Office 365, where you have that full partner managed experience, where you're not actually giving someone an account in your tenant, you're giving them partner delegated administrator access. You could do both, but they give you that ability to manage that way. And then I wanted to also talk about the encryption portion of it. I briefly touched on that before. Where with Office 365, the encryption is just automatic out of the gate. Once you set it up, it automatically enables those encryption services. With Google, it doesn't mean that you can't have the encryption. It just means that there is additional required configurations. And a lot of times, depending on what you're trying to encrypt, you may also need that third party. The other components are relatively similar, and they each have their own, but once you've considered that, then you really need to kind of talk about your migration path. And I do want to spend just a little bit of time here, where when you're talking about your migration, what I mean by that is if you're already existing on-prem and you're trying to move to a cloud-based solution. So with Office 365, you're set up. Once you've set up your tenant, there is a connection to it, and it will pull your data in through a migration process. With Google, you're going to migrate your mail, your calendar, and your contacts in a single migration for each one of those items. So it's really a minimum of 3 steps that you're utilizing for that. It's the same migration path that you would get through Office 365, where you're connecting, you're pulling that data in, but again, you have to do that in 3 steps. With Office 365, there's multiple companies out there: Quadratech, BitTitan, Skykick. There's a couple of there's a handful of different companies that make those utilities that will aid in that migration. With Google, right now, the supported migration is Google migration, and I'm referring to Exchange for that. So if you're going from Exchange to Google, there is a product called Google Migration for Exchange, and that is the only supported migration method that they have at this point. Permissions. This is kind of a key item for some locations. If you have an on-premise directory, so let's say you're using Active Directory. With Office 365, they have the Azure Active Directory sync, which gives you the ability to sync your on-premise accounts with Office 365. And that's customizable. You can make some changes. You can add different pieces that you want to put in there. But again, once you've created that synchronization, it will keep up based on the amount of time that you set, and I think the minimum still is 15 minutes. So every 15 minutes it will sync. So if you change your password, within 15 minutes you now have a new password that matches your on-premise account. With Google, you can do an export of your accounts and import them into your Google account, But without a third-party intervention and some setup, it doesn't have a native capability for you to keep that always-on synchronization connection. So you're essentially managing your on-premise network as well as your Google Cloud network, and depending on the size of your environment, that may not necessarily be be a big deal to your team. And then I really wanted to call out the channel, and I briefly mentioned this before, but Google's partner channel is significantly newer than Microsoft's partner channel that's been around for at this point decades now. So they have roughly 5,000 total partners within their partner channel, as opposed to the Microsoft partner channel, which is just over 90,000 with 45,000 cloud competent partners. So it's something to keep in mind depending on the amount of assistance that you're going to need with your migration and your setup and your configuration. So if you're requiring that somebody be there throughout the entire thing, then you may have to push that out, or maybe look at a later date to make sure that you get that assistance that you need from your partner channel. So the next one, and I found that in some cases this isn't a huge decision-making factor for people, but support is a key item. And on this one, I'm going to draw special attention to two major pieces in what we've discussed with our clients. The first one is SLA. The SLA for Office 365 covers all of the services that come in Office 365. So when you sign up, if it's in there, it's covered by their service level agreements that's covered underneath your plan. With Google, the SLA covers all of those core services, and for right now, the ones that it does not cover is Google Plus and Hangouts, and that's one of those boxes that you could check earlier when we were discussing your needs. So if those items aren't necessarily a key item for you, then that may not matter. When you're looking at your partner channel support, again, Google is still developing their ecosystem. So while they have some training that they require that their partners take, there is no full competency specifically around those items. So Microsoft requires that you have a cloud productivity competency to be able to take advantage of the support services in that partner ecosystem, where Google just requires that you be a Google partner, and then they want you to take those tests. So as we go through all of these items, I did want to talk about the bonus point that we had discussed, and I'll spend a little bit of time on this one, just because these are items that we make sure that we address with our clients, and this kind of goes along with the alignment of your future strategy. And it's about making sure that you're choosing the Mr. Right, not necessarily the Mr. Right now. So the first one is, are you going to be cloudifying? I'm trying to get that entered into the dictionary, but are you cloudifying more infrastructure as you move forward, or are you only looking for base services? So to give examples, if you're looking to kind of go for an infrastructure-based model, let's say you're going to move some virtual servers out to the cloud in the future, considering who you're putting that together with may make a difference. So if I'm going Office 365, I can actually extend my Azure Active Directory into Azure itself and then tie all of those components together. If I went with Google in that model, and let's say maybe I was either considering Azure or Amazon, I now have an on-premise, I have my Google, and I have my infrastructure cloud that I'm managing. So another item is, are you going to need a hybrid setup? So as I talked about earlier, without some significant connections, Google doesn't have that ability to fully create that hybrid connection. So if you're going to need that, where you want to put some expansion in the cloud, Office 365 is going to be the way to go on that one, because it gives you the ability to essentially expand your on-premise software and solutions into a cloud-based scenario. And that kind of plays into are you planning significant growth? Because if you are, that could actually play on either side depending on what you're using. So as I talked about, Google has simple plans to go with. So if you need some significant growth that's coming up and you just say, listen, I want everybody to have the same license. I don't have time to figure out little things. That's definitely going to be the way to go for you. So again, these are all different items that you want to make sure that you are taking into account when you're looking at your cloud-based solution.
And I'm going to encourage anyone that has questions to go ahead and send those now. As Chuck closes out here, we'll answer those questions.
So in summation of everything that we've kind of covered, the 8 points that you really need to make sure that you are taking into account is, one, how tech savvy are your troops, and what's that ecosystem that you're going to be using? Who's involved in it? What are the players, and how well do they play that game? What features are important to you? As you saw, there's check boxes across the board, but if some of those features aren't important to you, then you can just rule those out and then move on from there. What apps do you need to run? As we talked about, if you're just looking for cloud-based productivity apps, then either one of them is good for you. If you need something on-prem, then you're looking at an Office 365 solution. What are your compliance and security requirements? That only you can make that decision. Unfortunately, I can't memorize everyone's cloud or their compliance and security requirements. You know, I wish I could to make that easier for all of you, but you really need to be the one to make those decisions, and that should be a very, very hefty, high-level internal management discussion to make sure that everything that you're covering is handled by your cloud provider. And then, of course, the resources that you have available for setup. You know, how are you going to get that done? Are you using internal resources? What does your timeline look like? So are you going to have to engage a consultant? Are you going to hire somebody for a short time under contract? So those are all items that you should really take into consideration when you're going down. What are you migrating? Are you just doing mail, or are you going to do servers? Are you doing your mail, your online, or your files, or your personal files? Are you going to create an online file repository? How important is that support model to you? If you're okay with just kind of throwing a request online as long as they maintain their SLA, either model is good for you. Microsoft has been known to have a stronger real-time, real-person connectivity. And then, of course, the bonus points that we talked about is your longer-term cloud strategy. Have you put together where you're looking to go, and is your short-term decision going to adversely affect your long-term decision? So with that, I actually have a question that came up, and it's asking me to speak to the backup and restore capability of these services. So can I restore a mailbox for an e-discovery request for the past 2 years? So with the enterprise-grade plans, you definitely have that capability. You can put things in legal hold, or you can serve the mailbox, or you can put them in an archive solution. I will say that if you're looking for an immediate restoration of that data, most of these solutions do take a little bit of time to bring back, but you can bring back the mail if you put it into a legal hold. So once you delete a mailbox, you have 30 days to bring that restoration back, and that policy is the same for both Google and Office 365. But if you have that legal hold capabilities in Office 365, it will hold that mailbox indefinitely to be brought back. If you need something where you don't want to keep that legal hold, and you need almost to be able to do searches through mailboxes and searches through actual emails, there are actually third-party archiving solutions that will pull full mail services off onto either another cloud-based solution, or if you needed to keep that on-premise for let's say a compliance reason. But if you definitely want to, I'd love to hear more about the solution that you're talking about. So if you would like to reach out after this, please feel free to send us a message, and I'll sit down and have a conversation with you about it just to make sure that I fully understand what it is that you're going through.
Great. All right. Well, thanks, Chuck. I don't see any more questions here, so with that, we'll bring it to a close. I want to thank everyone for joining the webinar today and let you know to look for an email from us in the next day or so with a link to the recorded presentation and a copy of the PowerPoint out on our website. And as Chuck mentioned, if you have any questions at all or would like to talk a little bit more about this, just reach out to Chuck directly or give your local account executive a call or call us directly, and we would be more than happy to talk with you about it. So thanks again for joining, everyone.
Yep, thank you, everybody. I appreciate the time today.
Bye-bye.